Look forward to seeing you.
I tell you what, I mean, Travis asked me to come out here. I thought, you know, I have no business speaking to these veterans and all. These are my heroes. And especially following up after Dutch Van Kirk. I mean, that's what a tough act to follow there. But if I can share with you some of my stories, and all mostly it's about meeting veterans and things. That's what's really been important to us, is learning these stories from these guys. And I really appreciate that opportunity. Travis and the Liberty Foundation are a big part of these things, helping to bring people and veterans together. We really appreciate that. I'm gonna grab my water. I had somebody bring it, if you don't mind. I'll just tell you a little bit about my history. Years ago, I was flying some old airplanes. Got started with old airplanes. In fact, with Steve here, he had a BT-13, and what a cool old airplane. And he gave a lot of people rides in this airplane, and I'd help him out giving rides with it. We'd go to the air shows, fly it around, and it was a very neat trainer. Anybody that doesn't know what a BT-13 was, it was one of the primary basic trainers for World War II pilots, and it was a two-seat tandem airplane, and very, very cool to fly. Very nice flying airplane with a 985 on it. In fact, my children's first ride was in that airplane, only they were still in my wife's belly there. She was pregnant with triplets, and when they got their first ride, in fact, they were very close to being born when they got a ride in an airplane. But so we got to fly this airplane for a while, and then once the kids were born, we ended up buying a Beech-18. It was a twin engine. It's actually an X-Freighter that had the same engine as a BT-13, but it's a twin-tail, twin-engine airplane. And it was a restoration project. We would fix it up and fly it. And it was a nice family airplane, but it didn't really have any history to it or anything like that. It was just something that was a cool old airplane that we were slowly restoring. Well, this is still many years ago. I've been flying with Connie Bowler. Many of you may know Ed and Connie Bowler. They're a big fixture in the warbird community. They've had the Ismers P-51 airplanes, every kind of warbird you can imagine. And they're involved with B-17s, with the EAA, and many other warbirds everywhere. They're just very dedicated warbird people, husband and wife team that live down in Griffin. So I believe this was 2005, Ed Bolin calls and he said, John, we've got a B-17 that's nearing restoration completion down in Kissimmee, Florida. And we're looking for guys to help fly this airplane. And I know you have a Beech-18. I wondered if you might be interested in come and help us fly this airplane. We're going to tour the United States with a B-17. And it's just a great service, and you'll love it. It's really it's one of the neatest things you can do. And I told Ed, I said, well, gosh, I got so many things going on now with my job. We have 5-year-old triplets at home. I know this is a huge commitment. I don't know how I could do something like that. I mean, it's a big commitment. If they spend a lot of time training you on these airplanes, you want to be able to give back a lot of time also, because it's very expensive and time consuming. But I said I'll talk to my wife, and so I went to a friend that Eddie called, and she said, when she heard my story, she kicked me in the butt and said, "You get back on the phone right now, call him and say you'll do it." And it floored me, because I thought, what an opportunity, but there's no way to make all this work. Well, sure enough, Ed convinced me that you got to come down there, you got to meet these people. It is a wonderful group, and that's when I got to meet the guys at the Liberty Foundation, and it's headed by Don Brooks. You guys may or may not have heard of Don Brooks yet, because he kind of stays in the background of things. He has been so involved in many things aviation. He was actually one of the first, he's actually the first person to get down to the Greenland ice cap. He was going down in the Greenland expedition. Before they got to the T-38s, he actually tunneled down to a B-17. There's actually 2 B-17s that are in the Greenland ice cap of those T-38s. And Epps and Taylor, of course, mounted the P-38 expedition to get a P-38 out of there, but the construction company that they had hired failed to be able to get down there. They went bankrupt, and it was a flop. Well, Don Brooks, his father was a tail gunner on the original Liberty Belle B-17. His father had passed away, but he knew what it meant to veterans and his father and everybody to have a B-17 out there. And his goal was to find and restore a B-17, put it back in Liberty Belle colors like his father put it. And he spent just untold hours and money. I mean, and he, of course, going to this Greenland expedition was incredibly expensive. He invented this gopher. You've heard of the super gopher, the gopher, where they actually heated water and tunneled down into the ice cap, and they got down to these airplanes. Well, they got down to a B-17. They got down to the first B-17, and they found that it was crushed to less than 4 feet tall. The control yokes were sticking up through the fuselage. I mean, it was just not going to be restorable at all. They had no idea, but it was under 250 feet of ice, so it was so much weight over the years of the shifting ice and the weight of all that had crushed it so badly. There was no way he was going to be able to restore it. So heartbroken on that, they took the top turn off of it. They took some things that they could get to be able to say they'd been there and make it somewhat of a worthwhile expedition, but he realized that it was not going to be feasible to restore one of those B-17s. So his next step was he found an airplane that had landed on a frozen lake in Labrador, and he put in with the Canadian government to pull that airplane out of the lake. Since the lake was now thawed, they could during the summer they could pull that airplane up and hopefully restore it. And well, that got tied up in paperwork and all that, so it just didn't happen. So the next step was he found this airplane being restored down in Kissimmee, Florida. And it was in the final stages of restoration, but it needed a whole lot more money put into it, a lot more time. And that was the airplane that he made into the Liberty Belle. So they finished the airplane in 2005, and from then we started U.S. tours with it. We went all over the world. We flew everywhere from San Diego, San Francisco, all in New York. We were going all over the world. We'd always kick off the stops at Peachtree DeKalb every year since it was in Georgia, usually good weather. February, March, we'd start our stops here and give rides. And the whole mission of this was we would go to the airports and we would be able to give rides for people that wanted to take the flights, $430 to $450 a flight. And we'd give up to probably 10 flights a day, about average 8 to 10 flights a day. And then we'd open it up for people to be able to take tours and show the rest of the public. If you couldn't afford to fly, at least we'd get people on the airplane and let them go through it and tour it. And one of the things that really set the Liberty Foundation apart was we didn't want to charge somebody to go through the airplane like everybody else did. There was a couple other B-17 groups out there, and they would charge a fair amount of money to be able to get in the airplane. And we said, we don't want to turn anybody away. This is something, people could be on hard times or whatever their situation is. We don't want them to say $5 or $10 is too much money and walk away. We want them to be able to go through and we'll just take donations from there because this is an education for everybody. Well, one of the main unanticipated things that happened to me, and I'm sure all of our group do, is that when you open these airplanes up and you go to these cities, we got to meet a lot of the veterans. I mean, fortunately, there's still some veterans that are able to come out and tell their stories. And that's something I never realized. I thought we'd be flying a cool airplane around, going to neat places, and that would be good. But it was really the veterans coming out and telling their stories. We'd be at a stop, and a family would come out with their grandfather, and he would get near that airplane, and it would start bringing back a flood of memories to him, I'm sure. And when he got around another veteran, it was like he could tell stories that he's never told his family before. And I can't tell you how many times we've had the family members tell us he has never told those stories to us before. We've asked him so many times, tell us what World War II was like, tell us about it. And, they're so humble about it. They don't want to brag or anything like that, but when they got around the airplane and the other guys, they knew these guys will understand what we've been through. And so they started sharing these stories, and I had so many of these stories that just mean incredible amounts to me. And I mean, as you probably know, and my kids tell me that World War II is down to about 6 pages in the textbooks now, at least for where they are in 8th grade. They've seen about 6 pages of World War II history. And even though 4 years might be a short period in the history of time, it's such an important time to our country. I mean, that was just that was it. And to have this greatest generation among us right now, being able to still share these stories, and thank goodness we're still having guys be able to write books and tell their stories and put it in writing. We're getting living history videos and things to be able to share with those, because I mean, we cannot forget what all happened. I heard a statistic one time that the war in Iraq and Afghanistan is about 2% of our gross national product goes into fighting those wars that we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. It was 200% during World War II. You know, our generation just has no idea what that means. The sacrifices that people made, you know, we talk about recycling now to save the environment. I mean, they were saving everything back then. I mean, they were running out of aluminum for airplanes. Everything was a shortage. I mean, and I didn't understand any of that. I mean, none of us did. And so, meeting the people, the veterans and all that, is just given us all a fantastic education. And that's what really meant so much to me with this whole tour that we were able to do. And so, some of the neatest things that I've been able to do were being a part of that B-17 program, the Liberty Foundation. Well, we even actually, one of Don's visions, now Don Brooks, one of the big things he wanted to do also was take this airplane to Europe and honor the veterans there. And this just goes to show you, I mean, we operate entirely on donations. I mean, it's always hand to mouth. I mean, you had to go to stops and give the rides, take donations and things to be able to make it to the next city. And I mean, of course, your insurance and maintenance and fuel costs, everything is huge to operate one of those airplanes. So, you know, we operated on all volunteer help, and we just did whatever it took to keep them flying. But when there was a 390th reunion, that was the Liberty Belle's original group. Whenever there was a 390th reunion, Don said, have the airplane there. I'm going to offer it to the veterans at the 390th. We're going to be able to give them rides, their family rides, whatever they need. He was so committed to that. You know, losing money, whatever, didn't matter for that. That was the right thing to do. But also, he wanted to take it to England and go back over the base, Framingham, where the airplane was. And you talk about a lot of expense to do that, but he said, we're going to do it. And so he organized this. I didn't get to fly it over because it had so many important people with Don, the chief pilot, and all the big sponsors and the board of directors and all did get to go over on it. But Ray Fowler, the chief pilot, calls me up. They're circling over Greenland in the B-17, and they're right over the Greenland expedition site. They knew the coordinates on the GPS, so they're circling over that. He's got a satellite radio. He calls me and he said, John, he said, some of these guys are freezing so bad up here, they're not going to want to ride back. You can come back and help me fly it back to when we get to Europe. So he said, pack like you're going skiing and then double, because we're all freezing to death. Just at 10,000 feet, it is so cold up here. And just at 10,000 feet, during the middle of summer, this is July of 08. So they took it over to Duxford. They were there at the air show. They flew over the cemeteries. They flew over the bases. They took it on a grand tour there in England. And they were treated like rock stars. I mean, it was really neat to bring a B-17 back from the U.S. and bring it to Europe and show these guys, you know, honor those veterans also. But they really know their history better over there too. I must say they were very appreciative of the effort that went to bring that airplane.
This B-17 often comes to Atlanta to give veterans a chance to see one of the 11 still capable of flight. It was restored by Don Brooks of Douglas, Georgia, at a cost of $3 million. He did this in memory of his father, Elton, a tail gunner in the original Liberty Belle.
I came along shortly after the end of World War II, and when I was going to school, all the kids would say, you know, what did your father do during the war? And mine was a gunner, tail gunner on a B-17, so that's where my interest started.
He told us of one mission where 12 bombers, each with a crew of 10, went out to bomb Dusseldorf, Germany. Only one badly shot up B-17 made it back.
My father always said that one memory that he had that was probably the greatest was, you know, when they came back from the one mission, and they were the only plane that made it back from their squadron. So they went back to their squadron area that night, and you know, it was deserted, nobody there. And normally they were, you know, it's full of life, people out throwing baseballs or walking or riding bicycles or, you know, whatever. There were just a lot of people in the squadron area. you know, and they came home and it was deserted. Everybody was gone. You know.
The restored Liberty Belle was the star of the famous Flying Legends air show in Duxford, England last year. On the memory flight, she was accompanied by a P-51 and a British Spitfire.
See a pink lady get off behind us, please.
We'll introduce you to an 87-year-old veteran pilot who got to relive his dream and fly a B-17 again.
So once everybody got their patch of taking the B-17 over, Fran and I got to bring it back. My wife and I were part of the crew members flying it home. And I got to tell you, all of these experiences really make you appreciate. I mean, you think you get cold at 10,000 feet. These guys were up at 30, 35,000 feet, minus 60 degrees. We were just, you know, a little less than freezing, you know, well, 0 degrees or so. But even dressed as well as we could with all the latest gear for either what you would wear for skiing or cold weather and all, the best things we could buy didn't begin to keep us from getting really cold in that airplane. And we were only doing about 5-hour legs. The missions that the veterans were flying then were up to 10-hour legs or more sometimes, depending on how deep they would go. And at the 30-something thousand feet, many of the B-17 had open windows in the back. So there was drafting. I mean, it's just incredible, some of the things that we take for granted that they were doing back then. And then not to mention, I mean, we're not getting shot at or anything. We don't have flash or fighters after us. I mean, we're just flying in peacetime. And so you just forget about the little things that go along with that. I mean, being on oxygen, worrying about that freezing, the different things that would happen to you at altitude. Just a quick story. One of the veterans that was at a stop there, he told us a story. In fact, he showed us a story. He pulls up his shirt, he shows me this big scar down the side of his torso, and we thought it was flak or shrapnel or something hit him. He said, no, he said, I was one of the first guys to get an electric suit. He said, we were so cold up there, they devised this electric suit, you plug it in and turn it on, and then it would help warm us up, keep your body core temperature from getting too cold, because they were going higher and higher for the high altitude bombings. And he said, I got one of the first ones and it shorted out. He said, it burned me so bad. He said, I couldn't find the controls to turn it off fast enough. I didn't realize what happened. I thought I was hit or something first, and then realized it was my suit shorting out. Said, so I think they either had to abort the mission or whatever, but he had to go to the hospital for a long time. And once he recovered, they put him back. He went back in that ball turn again, and he flew more missions. He said he was always very reluctant to want to turn that suit back on because he was always afraid he was going to have another defective one or something. But he said, you got cold enough, you turned it on. There's no question, he needed that up there. But so flying it back from England, I mean, that was just an incredible experience. And then after that, we were touring this airplane. We go city to city, and I'm just one of the volunteer guys. We had a crew of anywhere from 5 to 10 crews that volunteer on the weekends that you can. We try to do like a weekend a month and all. And back in 2011, we were at Aurora. We'd done a great stop there near Chicago, Aurora Airport, and that was an old military base too, I believe. And we had a great stop. We're going to go to Indianapolis. Fran happened to be with me, and that was another one of the neat things about the Liberty Foundation. They let us bring our family along. My kids have been on the B-17. Friends could go on some of these reposition flights and all. Had to, you know, it was a neat experience that a lot of places would not let you do. Fran would come volunteer on the table and work to, you know, help sell the merchandise, sometimes act as a third crew member, because we all, you know, we have a third crew member to make sure everybody's buckled up for takeoffs and landings and things like that. So Fran was with us on this flight. We're just repositioning it from Aurora to Indianapolis area. And normal takeoff, everything's fine. And all of a sudden, after we get the gear up, we smell something just a little bit funny. I mean, it's just like, what was that? It smelled like a little bit of electrical or something. And I'm talking to the co-pilot, and he said, he's the one that said, I think it smelled like electrical. And so I started looking at the generator panel right beside my left knee, and I'm looking and none of the gauges are pegging out or nothing's abnormal. You know, because after the gear retracts, all the loads on the electrical meter should go down to 0. There's no real electrical load, so there was no problem. That was all normal. But I told the we had a mechanic with us on board. And I said, will you go down and check the generator control panel down beneath it? They have these regulators down there. They could get hot or something like that. They might stink a little bit sometimes if they got hot. So I had him go down there and look at that box and just see if it was making that smell that we got. And we're still looking around, and nothing was abnormal at all that we could tell visually. And so I'm actually looking outside now to see maybe we flew through somebody's little garbage pile fire or something like that, because we had just taken off. We were just climbing out through maybe 1,000 feet or so. And I thought, well, it must have been from the outside somewhere, because I had the window open a little bit. So still nothing, but we still smell it every now and then. We just get a whiff of something every now and then. And then I looked back behind me and I saw a little bit of smoke in the Bombay area. I said, oh, okay, we got something going on. We got to go back. So we were about 8 miles or 10 miles away from the airport. We started making a big turn back. And I don't think it was anything major at all. It was just, we knew we had something abnormal at that point. Well, something really remarkable that kind of happened with this, because we never have people flying in formation with us. All the veterans know what flying formation is, of course. When we're flying passenger flights, we can't ever fly formation. You can't have anybody closer than about a mile from you when you're flying passenger flights. Well, since we were doing a reposition, we had a friend of ours, there was a mechanic and another pilot that were going to fly down with us to Indianapolis, and they were in a T-6, another big trainer airplane like that BT-13. So they come up to us right about the time we decided we're going to turn around. They come up on our wing. And he gets on the radio and says, John, you got a fire. Get it on the ground now. Get it on the ground now. And it took a second to set in, but he's I don't even think I even spoke to him or anything. I'm just looking around like, what's he talking about? I know something's wrong, but we didn't see any fire and had no idea. But he saw it and he said, it's under your left wing. Get it on the ground now. And so I'm looking down there, and all there is cornfields, some houses, things like that. And I saw a couple of good fields, and so I said, well, knowing this guy, he is a great pilot. He's a great guy. I know he knows the airplane very well. If somebody out of the blue had told you that, you would probably say, maybe he sees some fire out of the exhaust. Maybe the turbo is blowing red hot. Maybe he saw a reflection on something. But this guy's on your wing. He knows the airplane. He says, get on the ground now. I put the gear down. We actually, since it was behind that engine, we actually feathered the engine, that number 2 engine, and we came around to land. I just made a 180-degree turn, left-hand turn, right down to one of these cornfields there. And it looked pretty good from what I could see as far as what to land on. Of course, you have these things about landing with the rows of corn. You don't know how freshly plowed it is, how wet it is, how anything about it. I didn't even know it was corn. I just saw fields down there, so I knew I had to put it on the ground. So he's looking at the power lines. There's towers out there, trying to get a picture of where you're going to land this airplane in there, and just picked out the best spot I could. And we go, and as I'm rolling out of the turn, I can't get the wings to roll up. We already put the flaps down, the gears down, everything's ready to land, and I can't roll the airplane upright because it still wants to bank into the turn. And so I've got full aileron, big wheels on this thing. I'm turning full aileron. I'm pushing full right rudder to straighten out the airplane. And I thought, man, that is really odd, because when you feather an engine, and I could see the blade was feathered straight out like that, I knew that the engine wasn't making any drag. It shouldn't be making the airplane on a bank like that. So all I could do is I said, well, we got to land and I got to straighten it out. So what we use is differential power. I'm really lucky on a 4-engine airplane. You can push up an outboard engine and steer it like we do in a normal crosswind. You just land with one engine at higher power, and that keeps the airplane straighter in any crosswind, or like the situation we had where it didn't want to roll out. So we used that differential power and kept it straight. Made a decent landing, actually. It was on the gear. We skipped a little bit, started heading towards this tree line there, and the co-pilot says, hey, we need to stop. And so I started getting on the brakes, but you couldn't do much with the brakes, or you just slide. But all of a sudden, we splashed through a bunch of mud. I mean, all of a sudden, we felt us slowing really fast, and it was just a couple of mud puddles we slid through, and it brought us to a stop pretty quick. And I told everybody to evacuate, bail out, or whatever. We all got out of the airplane, and I got to thinking, oh man, all our bags are in there and everything. And we knew by then, you'll see some of the pictures here, some of the early pictures. It was fairly significant right off the bat that I didn't feel like anything was going to explode or anything, so I said, let me just throw the bags at her. So I threw some of our bags and all out, and we thought the fire department will be here any second. In fact, we could hear them within minutes. We knew something was going on. And the T6 was circling around us. He was telling the tower right where we were. He was coordinating all this so that we could have fire trucks right there. And we thought maybe 5 minutes they'll be able to put this thing out and we'll be fine. And you know, it'll be flying, you know, in a matter of days after that. Well, we waited. We heard the fire trucks. We could see them up at the road, and nobody could get down to us. And I mean, by this time our hearts are just tightening up, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they got to get here quick. This is getting bad. You know, this is spreading pretty quickly. And so we were waiting, and all of a sudden, this it's a Ford Explorer or some kind of vehicle. The fire chief pulls up in this Explorer. He says, we can't get the fire trucks through. It's too muddy. We can't find a way through here. They're just getting stuck. And my co-pilot actually just yelled at him, get him down here, you know, we got to save the airplane. And he said, it doesn't do any good just to get them stuck there. We're trying to find another way around. So it was a real emotional time for us. I mean, we were just sitting here watching our baby, and I'm thinking 88,000 man hours, like 14 years of restoration. This airplane had just been restored a few years prior. And so many people had, you know, done volunteer work, you know, the dedicated people that it took to build that airplane. I'm just seeing all that going up in smoke right now. And we had tears in our eyes. My wife and I are standing there with our arms around each other. We didn't even want to take pictures. Some of these pictures are from our own cameras, but we didn't even want to take pictures. But we got to do something. We wanted to take a few pictures of it. And probably the first picture we even took was about 5 minutes after, and you could see it was, you know, at that point it was salvageable, but the fire trucks, they ended up towing them in with tractors, and it was probably closer to 20 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes after we landed before they got the first fire trucks there. And then guess what? They're water trucks. They're like brush fire trucks, like an F-250 with a tank on the back. And putting out that fire with aluminum, some wood, oil, fuel, all that stuff, it wasn't going to touch it. It was not until 20 or 25 minutes that they got a foam truck out there that actually came from the airport. The foam truck at first went to the airport where we were going back to, and then they had to redirect him to come out to where we were. That was about 8 miles away. So it took him a long time to get there. And when the foam hit it, that was great. I mean, that put it out. But as you can see in some of the pictures, it didn't. There was a lot of it gone by then. And we were just all heartbroken. I mean, I've got one of the mechanics. We got some people. We actually had a couple of air traffic controllers that were volunteers that helped out. And we had about 7 people on board all total. And we're all just sitting there hugging each other, and we're saying, gosh, I just can't believe it. Nothing could be done. We had to sit there so helplessly and watch it. Well, the Liberty Foundation, Don Brooks and all that, he called me, and he said, John, he said, don't worry about it. He said, nobody was hurt, that's all I care about. That was the hugest weight you could ever have lifted off your shoulders right there, because I feel responsible for obviously the crew but the airplane too, and that made me feel so good that he was thinking about me, that he wanted me to not worry about it so much. And knowing Don and what all he did, the reason for doing this, it hurt us all badly, and we thought, well, this is it. If you lose that airplane, it's irreplaceable. And the insurance money was not great. It paid for what was owed on it and maybe bought the airplane back. I mean, they weren't going to just go out and be able to buy a B-17 again. This wasn't going to work. So Don could have stood back and said, you know what, we accomplished everything I wanted to do. I built a B-17 to honor my father and the veterans. We toured the U.S. with it for years. We got to go to Europe with it. We did all that. But he's very dedicated. I mean, he still loves this airplane, and he's the kind of guy that wants to do whatever it takes. And really, when you look at the airplane, as bad as it looks, the engines, the props, the wingtips, the tail, the Norden bomb sight, a lot of things survived on it. So there was a lot of things left over to work with. And he is such a resourceful guy. I mean, oh, by the way, I meant to tell you, the Canadian government approved their permits to go get that other B-17 out of the lake. So in the meantime, after we've been flying the Liberty Belle airplane, he's recovered an airplane out of the lake. Of course, it's terrible conditions, all that, but he's got another B-17 project with parts and things like that. But so that's going to be another airplane he's working on. Well, and he came out with the Liberty Foundation guys. He said, we're going to rebuild the Liberty Belle. We're going to make this happen. It got rebuilt from being totaled by a tornado up in New Hampshire. And it's, you know, it's been in bad shape before, but there's enough of that airplane left to rebuild. We might have to put a new spar in it and things like that, but all B-17s kind of need a new spar now anyway. They're 70-something years old, and you know they've had issues with some of those airplanes, so we might be doing something that helps benefit everybody. We might build a few of the spars so that other airplanes might have them. But he's that kind of guy that's thinking about long term, let's do it again. And so that airplane is actually being slowly rebuilt. We're operating all off donations, of course, so that's one of the neatest things that happened. We negotiated with the Talashay family. Dave Talashay is the guy that started the 57th and the restaurants, and a lot of these themed restaurants, the Baby Does and all. He did a lot of neat things with airplanes and themed restaurants and all. And he actually was in the Bloody 100 himself, a co-pilot on B-17s. And so he had this other B-17 they used in the movie Memphis Belle. And after he passed away, his family worked with the Liberty Foundation, and since we're one of the only organizations out there that has this exemption that allows us to give passenger flights, and the Talashay family did not. It was just his airplane just sitting in a museum in New York, Geneseo, New York. It was really not viewed by many people at all. We struck a deal where we lease that airplane now. We're out touring the U.S. with it again. We're giving rides, and the same thing we did before in their airplane. And the funds from that, from the rides and the tours and all, are going towards the Liberty Belle now. So after we pay our bills with them and make that happen, we're taking everything else to go to the Liberty Belle restoration. And in the meantime, Don Brooks, he got a fuselage. It was hanging in a bar in Colorado. If anybody remembers the movie 12 O'Clock High, the fuselage that we used in that movie was in a bar in Colorado, and he struck a deal to get that. So that's one of the big components for rebuilding the Liberty Belle. So it's slowly coming together. It's going to take many years, many millions of dollars and all that, but it's the kind of people like this that would really make me proud to be part of the Liberty Foundation. I mean, it's almost all volunteers. It's just a great bunch of people, and I just, so many of my life experiences, the positive life experiences came from being around that airplane, these people, and meeting the veterans and all that. And I mean, it's been just a wonderful ride with them. And the fact that devastating fire that we had didn't shut them down. I mean, that was basically all of the Liberty Foundation at the time. To see it go up in smoke, we just thought that's it. But now we're back on track to flying again, giving these tours, doing the mission that we started out with. And that Memphis Belle airplane, it's not the original Memphis Belle, of course. It's the replica that was used in the movie. It's still every bit as neat. I mean, to be able to go and meet these veterans out there. And just a few weeks ago, I was up in Manchester, New Hampshire, met a veteran that was, he was at Pearl Harbor during the bombing. He was a crew chief on Catalina's. He watched his brother go down on Arizona. And he was still there to tell stories. He got together with another veteran. Next thing you know, they're spilling all these great stories. And I mean, and there's a picture of them on one of our slides here. But just remarkable. And I mean, I'm so thankful that we're still able to meet these veterans and hear these stories, and for my kids and the other children. Because as you guys already know, I mean, so many people in every family are affected by or were affected by B-17, World War II, and all that. Somebody has a relation, through some relative. You probably had somebody in a B-17 or a B-24 airplane that was over there in Europe, part of the war, and believe me, that's what it took to win the war, is those B-17s and B-24s. So these people that are coming out and bringing their kids or bringing their grandfather to come see the airplane and sharing this history is really what it's all about. And then being here, I'm so honored to be meeting these guys and trying to tell just a few of my little stories. But thanks again for all that you did for us. And I'm just beginning to appreciate what all it was like. I mean, to fly that old airplane out, that was neat. But I mean, I imagine being in that ball turret for 6 or 8 hours, crouched up like that. And I mean, it makes me get cramps in my legs just thinking about it. Or being a tail gunner or something. The most dangerous place in the war, probably, being that tail gunner, because every fighter wanted to shoot the tail gunner first because they would down that airplane right away with 10 people if they could get the tail gunner. So we learned so much about this, and I really was fortunate to be a part of it. And just makes me really appreciate what you guys did for us. Because anytime I ever feel hot or cold in an airplane, I imagine how cold it was on the ground working those airplanes during the nights to get them back flying the next day, repairing the damage, or when you're flying in somewhat miserable conditions, whether it's really hot or really cold. So that's nothing. I mean, this is easy flying compared to what they did. I mean, and the sacrifices that the people back home made. And so many things that went into that. I just don't want our generation to take it for granted. And thank you to Travis and everybody for help sharing this. You know, that's it takes a generation now that's dedicated to passing it on. And so I'll open up for questions and answers and all that. And the first question, go ahead, I'll let you ask it first.
Did NTSB ever find out what the cause of the fire was?
No, that's about what I was going to say there. It's still under investigation. And one of the pictures there, now this is one of the most telling things, is somebody, and I believe it was a fireman, looked up and snapped a picture of the airplane as we were flying. Jason, would you come up and pick up that picture off the iPad? He's pretty good with this. There's a picture that shows the airplane overhead, and it shows where the fire was on the under the wing. And that was what the T6 saw when he came up with us. He saw this fire right where it was. It happens to be an area where there's a boost pump right there under that wing. The boost pumps are right under the fuel tanks. There's all the fuel lines for all the engines. And I don't know if anybody can see that picture, but it's there's a small fire, which is really pretty significant when you think about the size of that airplane. And there's a high resolution version one too, but where that fire is right near a boost pump. But there's turbo oils for the turbochargers. There's a lot of electrical. Right there. All the wiring goes through there. It's an area where everything comes through because it's behind the fuel tanks. So they still haven't decided. It's on the NTSB page. It says that it is that it's soon to be released, but they haven't been able to. They had the fuel tanks were still there. Some of them will burn off the top and things like that. The fuel tanks were recovered, the fuel pumps were recoverable, but they really haven't found the smoking gun, so to speak, of what really caused it. And that, we all want to know. There's only about 12 B-17s out there flying, but every one of the 12 wants to know, hey, what was this? And we all just did major fuel tank and fuel pump inspections. They just basically, on their own will, they didn't come out with an AD or anything. But we had them voluntarily, everybody checked their system very well to make sure there wasn't any chafing or leaking or anything on that. And I got to tell you, this airplane was this was the newest B-17 out there. It had been replumbed and wired, and everything was good about it. And we had some of the best maintenance, Delta mechanics were volunteers, plus some of the best people you could have work on that airplane, and it still could happen. But I still maintain that B-17 is the safest airplane to be. And I mean, like you've seen the pictures of those things flying home with battle damage and all that, that was what was amazing about that airplane. And once we got the word, we had to put it on the ground. Then we had time to do it. That was great. My wife was in the back of the airplane when this happened, and she was looking out the window. And she said when she first saw it, it looked like about a volleyball-sized hole. She saw fire come out. It didn't register. What in the world was that? And so she went to go up to tell us, and she said at that time she saw that we were very busy up there. I think the word was holding elbows and all, trying to get the airplane configured and turn. She realized that we were about to land. She said in the 90 seconds it took us to turn the airplane around and land it went from being that volleyball size to about a 2-foot by 3-foot square hole that was just burning up through the wing too. So when the T6 off was at the bottom, and then when she saw it, it was coming through the top of the wing. And what we later realized is the reason that I had those control difficulties on the airplane is that it actually burned through one of the flap controls, and so we didn't have a left flap. When we put down the flaps, only the right one came down. The left one stayed up, and that made it want to roll into that engine. So, and what we later also returned from going over the wreckage, or not wreckage really, but the remains of it the next day and all, was all the control cables, everything looked great. There's like the airplane is melted away from it, and there's still stainless steel control cables going out to your ailerons, your controls, your trim, everything is there. But all the turnbuckles that hold those together were missing. So we were just probably a matter of just a minute or two of not having any aileron control, and that would have made the airplane totally under control. So it was so, I mean, I call Cullen, the guy in the T6, he was our angel. I mean, God put that angel there on our wing at that time to tell us what he did, because if we would have gone back to the airport, we wouldn't have made it. I mean, there's no question after seeing what we found out later that that airplane would have probably lost aileron control, and we would have had no way of keeping it straight, even with the differential power and all that. It would have been uncontrollable. So there was somebody looking out for us there, and of course the B-17, being the great airplane it was, made it all possible. But we want to see it fly again, and I want to be the first one to fly it. Any more questions? Anything? Yes, sir.
Did the conditions inside the airplane get any worse, or was just, I mean, you didn't have any great amounts of smoke or anything?
No, we really didn't get much smoke in the airplane. Fran could tell us from the back. I don't think she said that.
When I ran up to the cockpit, I ran through some of the bomb bay, but it was not coming in.
Some of the sad things that we saved from the airplane. First of all, Fran's purse was in the airplane. I didn't get that out, so she lost her compacted mirror and all that, and everything from her passport. Yeah, I mean, her wallet and everything was gone. This is the thing that kind of hurts me some of the most. Is we used to have veterans every time they come out the airplane, they would sign our back door. We had any veteran at all. We'd love to have them sign. There's a picture of that in the iPad there somewhere where we had so many signatures. I mean, we were visiting so many places and got to see enough veterans where we had this door full of signatures. And that's one of the things that didn't make it. We got the door handle, but we got a lot of pictures of those signatures. And actually, we had saved some of the replacement door skins where the guys had signed it. We had actually taken one off, put a new door skin on it, and then signed it again. But this door skin was full of signatures on it, and it didn't make it. But we do have the front hatch. A lot of the other things did make it with a lot of signatures, and that's still all important to us. So also a rudder pedal. I believe that was magnesium, and some of that magnesium stuff would just burn like firecrackers until they got the foam on it, and the foam would put it out, but nothing else, of course, would. Yes, sir.
How did the farmer take you coming down into his rocks?
They were really nice about it. I was a little bit shaken up about this, and we were busy. I talked to the FAA and TSB and guys like that. Rand talked to the farmer, the people that own the field, and they were so nice about it. We really looked good at the crops there, between the fire trucks and the foam and the water and all that. And we flew over it. Within a year later, we were flying over in a little airplane and circled around it to see the damage of that area. I was saying, I kind of wonder about how that corn tastes in that area. Yeah, that's right. It's popcorn for sure. He was very nice about it. What we did is we sent him a care package later of a lot of the memorabilia, the B-17. We sent him videos and things, and we just thought it was so cool that he didn't come out and raise Cain with us, or try and charge us exorbitant fees for hurting his crops and things. They were very nice about it, and obviously we offered to replace whatever damage, but we did send him a package of posters and a lot of things like we had here, some that anything we could just to kind of repay the favor for being so good to us. Because I tell you what, if you can imagine, not just the fire trucks coming through there, but then the recovery had to happen the next day. They called out all these trucks to get them out of there because more rain was coming in. The field was already a little bit wet. They forecasted more rain, so they hired this recovery team to come out. And this was one of the things that hurt me as bad as anything. They cut that airplane up pretty bad, pretty quickly. And they weren't worried about us being able to reuse some of those parts. Like we knew, hey, this is going to be reusable. Take it easy on that wing. They were in a hurry. They wanted to get it out there, get on flatbed trailers and go before the rain came. And so we went round and round on them a couple of times. And they actually accidentally dropped one or two engines off the back of the trailer because they were trying to drain. The oil was bubbling up on their trailer. And I thought, we'll just dump it here because they've got to haul off all this dirt anyway, so it's contaminated. They went and killed the trailer up and dropped an engine off the back of it. And so it's goofy stuff like that, just being in a hurry, that just really hurt us to see that happen. But the farm was great.
Well, you were fortunate that you had a field to land in.
Absolutely. You think back to all the time we spent over the water going to England, and we think of all the times we're flying over parts of the U.S. that are just mountains and trees and everything else, and to have a field that perfect where it was amazing. That was one of those things where somebody's watching out for you. It doesn't happen very often when all the time you're flying that you have a good place to land like that right up underneath you. So that was very, very fortunate.
Mark? this aircraft now?
Well, most of it is in Canton, up in North Georgia there. They've shipped the wings and everything they can to Canton. They've got some recovery, or some restoration being done there. And a lot of it's being done, the Liberty Foundation, most of it is down in Douglas, Georgia. That was an old training base for steerman training base, but they have hangars down there where they have the Labrador Lake B-17 and parts of the Liberty Belle are down there, and I think the 12 o'clock high fuselage is there. So they have to kind of farm this out. They get groups that, hey, they can tackle maybe some wing work here, we can do some fuselage work here. They've actually got fuselage jigs down in Douglas, Georgia. So that's where the main fuselage section. It took a long time for the NTSB to release all that too. They wanted to have a good look at it. Obviously, for all of our sake, we wanted to know what it was. So they didn't release the fuselage for a long time, and so they could get maybe metallurgy tests, whatever they needed to do. So it was many months before they would turn loose of it, and then we finally had it all back in Georgia now.